Very good. All right. I will call to order the Education Committee meeting. We have myself as the chair, Glenn Iosu, and to my right is another committee member, John Kern, and to my left is a board meeting, Chris Spear. We're recording this live. It's an information-only meeting, no voting, and I'll turn over the agenda over to Dr. Hoffman. We do have meeting minutes. We're not going to vote on them. They're just for information. We'll vote on those during the regularly scheduled upcoming Thursday meeting, as we'll have everyone in attendance. Go ahead.
Thank you. So a first note, thanks for mentioning, we do have an additional Education Committee meeting this Thursday, November 10th, and that will be at 6 o'clock. We will be ending at 6:30 because there is an executive session that will begin before the board meeting. So first topic for discussion is, at the last meeting, I shared a list of the program of studies and plan course statements that we are seeking approval for on Thursday night at the main board meeting. So the question, I guess, on the floor, so to speak, right now is, are there any concerns about any of those courses, any changes that need to be made to the program of studies prior to it being presented for a vote on the November 10th meeting?
Sure. Appreciate that. Yeah, I actually went through the document that was posted with the comments, the changes made between the last year and this year program of studies being proposed. The only item I always find, and just in my work profession as well, the links sometimes don't work.
Okay.
So if you have someone go through the links, when I clicked on IEP, for instance, it didn't go right to the right link, and it happens all the time because websites change their links.
So some of the links are broken.
Yeah.
And do you know specifically if it was a link to an external link or a link within the document? Because we did have some problems with the bookmarking. So in a document, you can bookmark to go to a separate section of the document itself, like not external.
Yeah.
And we had some of those. So we'll go through and make sure we try.
I didn't select every link. I just, out of curiosity, I actually went down to IEP. I did go where it links you back into a different area of the document. But when it talked about IEP, I was curious about that because I know we have 20% of our population IEP. When I selected that link, the link was broken. It was an external link.
Great. We will go ahead and make sure we try to clean that document up before Thursday and repost it for...
I noticed when I was going through the tech school, it linked back to the tech school programs. I liked how you had, which it probably lengthened the document, but if it was easy, if not too much of a hard effort, if you can have like a little summary of each program within the tech school, there's lots of programs offered. It's also, I think it'd be nice, just from the educational standpoint, I know we're moving over to the Keystone pathways, if there's a way to indicate if it has the certification needed. I know there's certain programs at tech school some have or some don't have, or it's unknown. I think that'd be useful if a student knows it's has that certification. Just for information purposes, if there's a way to do that, or if that's too complicated, just food for thought. And
so thank you for that, and two pieces of feedback for that. One, I also would love to see a list of those programs and what their certifications are, but we do not currently have that from the technical school. So I wonder if it would be possible for you as the chair of this committee to task the JOC with having them update their website.
I can ask the JOC,
okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I would ask that is that we did used to have those programs as part of our program of studies, which was confusing and redundant because we don't actually offer the courses. And so if they would make a change, even any word change to their document or to what was allowed, we didn't update ours, and then we had out-of-date information. So a few years ago, we made the decision to link directly to the tech school so that whatever programs they had, if they update their program of studies, if they update anything, ours points to theirs. So I'm hesitant. I'll do it if you'd like me to, but I'm hesitant to make a change to ours unless I'm confident that if they make a change, they're going to notify us so that I can update ours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, understood.
So we can certainly look at doing that. I'm not sure that we'd be able to have that ready for the 10th, only because we'd have to communicate with the tech school and make sure that everything that they have is up to date and ready to go on our website.
Okay, that's fair.
But I'm happy to make a note about moving that direction in the future if that's something.
Yeah, I mean, if it's, I know it's nice to have a document that's complete, but there's so much information that you have to link to other sources. So I understand the efforts involved with either copying or making a description. But I think Yeah, I'll ask the JOC at the board meeting if they can potentially ask the tech school for the credentialing program for each of those courses, because students are going to be interested if it's credentialed or not for the Keystone pathways in the
Sure.
future. Yeah.
And they should all offer, I'm told that they all offer some type of industry-based credential. So I believe that they all would offer that, but I think it would be the tech school who would be able to indicate which programs have which credentials and how you can receive them. I wouldn't have that information.
Okay.
Yeah, because some of those credentials come year 2, some year 3, some, not until year 4. So I'm actually not sure when those credentials are reached and in there, but I believe if you're going to use them in place of the Keystones, and that's what you're referring to here, you would need to, it would help to know what that timeline is, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
that's the ask then?
I believe that, I think it's sort of like two different asks. We already have an ask of the tech school to provide us each year with the number of students who are considered concentrator completers, which means that they've done at least 2 years of the program. That is what triggers first that you can even go into category or pathway 3. So once they meet that, then they also need additional credentialing. And so the tech school has been asked by the high school to complete a document that indicates every kid's name, whether or not they've met those credentials. I don't want to put Dr. Zakin on the spot, but it looks like I'm going to do that anyway. Do you know if that has been received back? As of Friday, it wasn't. Okay, so we're still waiting for that. We've reached out a few times for that information, so hopefully they'll be able to get that to us soon. But I think moving forward, as a separate ask, what I'm hearing from Mr. Iosu is that it would be helpful in the program of studies, either on our page or at the tech school's page, to actually be able to see if you complete this program, here's the credential that would be, a possibility for you. It doesn't need to say that you'll be guaranteed to complete that credential, but maybe through this, through this program, you have an opportunity to become ServSafe certified or your OSHA 10 or whatever.
Yeah, that would be
certificate
good. I'm going to be there later this week for an agenda meeting, so maybe I could, pass along some information for you, Glenn, or?
Yeah, it'd be great. I think it'd just be helpful. I mean, if a student knows he's not going to college, he wants to choose a career readiness pathway, it'd be nice to know that skill is going to be useful for future employment. And if you can credential them, that's going to help them. That's all. So it'd be useful information if we can get that as students decide on what track they want to go forward with, whether it's a career or college.
Yeah, and I would just say fix it at the source, do not duplicate.
Right. Good.
Don't take that onus on us.
Right. Good. So that's, I'll put an asterisk there, and we'll get Mr. Spear to give us an update maybe on Thursday for our half-hour meeting.
Okay.
And then I think there was strong consideration given on credits, on graduation requirements. I did have the opportunity to discuss that a little further with Mr. Jackson, who had it brought to our attention that it would be great for the tech school to have maybe potentially less credits, and we were talking about elective credits and what could we do to maybe have phys ed and health reduced. And I think during the last discussion meeting, we were looking at potentially having an option to reduce the health and phys ed to the state minimum. I think right now they're at 1 and 1, and the state minimum is a half and a half for phys ed and half for health, which would be a total of 1 credit. And then I was looking at other school districts in relation to that, and there are other school districts in Central Bucks that do similar. They only have a half and a half. They don't have 1 and 1. If we were to keep the total number of credits the same at 24, but instead for tech school or career readiness track, have them do a half and a half instead of 1 and 1, and then shift the remaining over to electives, is that too much of an ask, or what would that look like? I'm just curious.
So at this point, the only ask is a vote for that, and then we would make the change in the program of studies. That at this point, that would need to come from direction for the board. It isn't a recommendation that was made by the district. So we can do it. As I've explained before, we would still be able to meet the requirements. I'm a little concerned about, in talking with some of our staff, and particularly Dr. Bubser, who had previously worked very closely with our HPE teachers and doing a lot of that curriculum to better understand the standards. In physical education in particular, the way that the standards are worded, it would be difficult to show that students have had multiple opportunities to progress towards the standards if they're only taking it one time. But it doesn't mean that legally we can't do it. Just wanted to share a concern.
Sure.
And then also that the previous board had asked us to increase health to 1 from 0.5 due to some concerns with students in terms of mental health and other topics that needed to be addressed. So again, just giving some background on why they're currently at 1. But if the board wishes to reduce those to 0.5 specifically for tech school students, you would just need to let us know, and we would update the program of studies as such.
Okay, good. Just figure it doesn't hurt to inquire further on that one. And then
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you think that we would get that direction at the Thursday night meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we'll just probably decide on it as a collective board. Yeah. The other item I know that you're asking about program studies and any questions on the material. I did sort of probe a little bit on the advanced placement pre-calculus. When I select that link, it took me to AP school studies at the college level and listed, I guess, maybe the AP program link that shows all the advanced placement courses. When I looked at that link that I believe is current, up to date, it doesn't list AP pre-calculus. So I was curious as why would we offer a pre-calculus if it's not actually offered at on that main list?
Sure. So it's actually not going to be offered until the 2023-2024 school year.
Okay.
So we would be approving it now for next year because that's the first year that it would be offered by the college boards. It's a brand new class.
So that's sort of information we found behind the scenes. It's not posted, but it's happening.
Sure. So
Okay.
they send out information to the schools, and particularly schools that they know offer AP classes, just sharing, this is an upcoming class, this is something we're going to be offering. It went to myself, to some of my colleagues, also to some of the math teachers at the high school who currently teach calculus and other classes. And we felt that, given what we know, it would be a nice opportunity for students to have that are on that advanced math pathway to have that opportunity. So that was our ask.
All right, that's fair.
And that would be replacing honors pre-calc that was currently on the program of studies, right?
Correct. It would be replacing honors pre-calculus, but there still is an on-level pre-calculus class that students can take. So if you want to take pre-calculus, but you're not sure you want to do the AP or what was previously honors, you still can take on-level pre-calculus.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, John, did you have any other questions on program studies? So I know John, Mr. Kern had a question on the Woman in History. I think it was a new program or new course offering for electives. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions was, what if we move forward with that course, what is the current, I guess, history, because it is talking about history, is deficient? Like, is our U.S. history is deficient in talking about women in history? I'm just trying to understand that more.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was, and maybe we could ask if the teacher who was interested in teaching it and wrote that would be willing to come to the meeting if you had other questions. But I can see if she would be available for that. But my understanding is, and maybe a different example would be that in our biology class, we certainly talk about anatomy and how structures of organisms and things. But students who want to dive a little deeper into that would take a full year of anatomy. So not just what you learn in biology. And I think that the idea, from what I understand from her perspective, is that we do talk about some of these topics throughout our social studies curriculum, but there may be students who have a specified interest in this one piece. So, similarly in our science classes, there are very general overtones of forensics and those types of identification, but then we went ahead and made actually now 2 electives for students who want to learn more about that. So my understanding is that it's not a deficiency in the curriculum, but instead an ability to go a little bit deeper for students who have a particular interest in that area.
And this is an elective, not, you can't take it
Correct.
as a social studies?
You cannot take it as a social studies. It's purely an elective course. And as with all of our classes, if we don't have an interest, then we don't run it.
Okay.
So we could have an in-depth course offering on the U.S. Constitution, for example.
We could. Sure. We could have an in-depth elective offering on anything in any content area as long as there's a standard that it ties to, and we have enough students who are interested in teaching it and a teacher who's certified to teach it.
Okay, good. Would is it be a new textbook of some sort offered do you have enough enrollment? We'll just have to
Yeah,
find
so
out.
typically what happens is once we would get the course approved, we would start looking at a resource. We wouldn't purchase that resource until July 1, both because of our fiscal standards in terms of when we purchase things. Right, Ms. Young? We don't purchase things in the year that we're in, not until the year we're going to use it. But we also would be looking at making sure that we have enrollment and that we plan to run the course.
Okay, good. I think that's, what I was able to see in just going through the program studies that you had shared. So I appreciate your, sharing of the track changes and just figure you some feedback, what I saw so far and from this side of the table. And then obviously if there's other board members that have concerns or questions, they could bring it up at the education committee or during the board meeting itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
And while I would like to take responsibility for that, or Dr. Zakin is really the one who did the amazing work behind getting that document ready. So I'd like to thank him for that.
Thank you, Dr. Zakin. So I know I had a rolling agenda, and whenever you feel you want to add input into that, but just picking off maybe the back end of it, which was talking about third-party surveys. During the recent board meetings I've attended, there was concerns from parents about notifications to the parents, and I think it was discussed at a board, and that the building itself should be sending out notices, and maybe they didn't see the notice via email, or maybe the notice didn't go out regardless, but there was a reference by the administration that we would send out or make sure that the building, which would be the principals, send out notifications to the parents before third-party surveys are issued. So what I was trying to get there is there a way, because it seems like there's a lot of surveys or a lot of maybe research out there that are always trying to collect information on students, and how necessary are some of them. I was just thinking, because it seems to be a concern from parents these days, is there a way that instead of having an opt-out process to actually have an opt-in, which is basically similar to what you were discussing earlier about tech school, or if you're doing a class trip, you don't just send the kid on the bus, and if the parent didn't say nothing, you just send them on the bus. You get parent consent. Is there a way to do that with a survey where the parents would have to opt in instead of opt out? Because by default, these surveys with privacy issues that we're seeing these days are just giving them without opt out, and hope that maybe no one opts out. So I just want to bring it to light because I know data and privacy is concerned these days, and it seems that maybe parents feel it's slipping through the cracks. We don't want to give everyone the opportunity to have their say, but whatever is best. I mean, I don't want to create an administrative nightmare for the administration, but if there's a way to better administer those surveys so the parents have a say, I don't know if, just throwing it out there. That's the reason I had it as a rolling agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I would
Yeah.
certainly not feel like I'm in a position to be able to make a decision about that. So I would defer to
Yeah.
the superintendent for that. But I do believe there's a couple different things going on here. So we have like internal surveys, for instance, panorama surveys, which our district utilizes in an attempt to meet board goals and just to get better at what we're doing every day to get more information. And those types of surveys, I believe, have been regularly reviewed, and the community knows that they come. We give them multiple times a year for multiple years. I think that is different than, let's say, I know that this came up because of the PAYS survey, I believe, was the original way that this came up,
Right, from the state attorney.
a few years
Yeah.
ago. And those types of surveys that are given by an outside agency through us, I'm not sure, I'd have to look into what the protocols are for something like that in terms of opt-in or opt-out. Additional surveys that are given, I'm trying to think of, there's another one called Ed Options, which they try to send to us, and for the past couple of years, we have chosen not to participate in that because of concerns specifically from my office about some of the questions that it asks in terms of family information and education information that it doesn't benefit us at all. We don't get the data back, so I'm not concerned about sending that off to somebody else. And then we also have, like, we were just notified that we are going to need to do NAEP testing, which is a national test that they randomly select some schools for, and Strayer was selected. So we would be sending out information that testing would be coming. So we try whenever something's coming from the outside, of course, to make sure that people are aware to the best of our ability. And to your point, if they don't see the email or they don't respond back, that is sometimes a difficulty. But we will continue to do our due diligence to let people know that it's coming up while we, I guess, look for other solutions if that's what you'd like. I can certainly pass that on to Dr. Harner to talk about what that would look like. Yeah,
and then maybe just food for thought, if it's a survey that we know it could be administered at school, we could always mention it to our board meeting. Hey, just so know, so they have another forum, or if they're listening in, they can understand that, make a public announcement of some sort, besides just at the building level. And so the board, or if people have concerns or interest in looking at that further, they can, Yeah.
Sure. And I do know that Ms. Edwards, after that was brought up a few meetings ago, did remind all of the principals that they needed to make sure that something was going home for surveys that were being sent out. And also, at that time, she reminded them about having speakers who were coming in and just putting that in their newsletters so parents knew that a speaker would be there on a given day.
Okay, good.
Well, I mean, even maybe like as a welcome email that goes out to parents when students start every school year, say, these panorama or these surveys may be utilized. Here's a link to their terms of service. We don't allow them to collect or share any information, something like that. Sort of those legal disclaimers that no one reads about anything, but at least, we're covering ourselves to say we are giving everyone that information if they want to dive into them.
Sure. I'll make a note about that.
Good. It seems like lately, everyone's asking for surveys these days, and they're becoming more frequent. So, be good to have just a harder look at that if they're becoming more frequent. Yeah.
Understood.
I know we talked about the start times, and it was presented at the board. Just moving on. I don't know if there's any other comments or discussions on that. Surveys, good. Okay.
Can I just? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
From our perspective, the direction, I think, was not quite clear in terms of where we are with the start time. So the proposal that we put out was an attempt to have 6 through 12 aligned, a 2-tier bus system, and school starting at 8 o'clock so that students who are at the technical school in both the AM and PM sessions can have 4 full classes with us and their lunch. And we were able to do that in the schedule that was proposed to C. I have additional copies that was passed out last time, but if anybody needs anything. And I think because of the tie-in, right, to it's not just here's the new high school schedule. It's here's a new high school schedule that works if we move to a 2-tier busing system, which I think at this point was somewhere around 2 additional buses, and decide that we want to have 6 through 12 on the same schedule, starting at 8, and whatever other things I'm not thinking of right now. And it felt like that was, for me, a little bit bigger than the Hoffman decision. I'm comfortable with what we put forward, but there's financial implication, there's school start time implication, and that had not previously been something that was the charge of just the education committee. It was a little more collaborative.
Yeah, agreed. And it was just, I appreciate the effort that was put in there by Mr. V. One of the requests was to see what would it look like to flip the high school and middle school, but that didn't come out as an option. Is there an option out there that was discussed where you flip the high school and middle school and you actually have a 3-tier bus system, and what that would look like based on the tech school and extracurricular activities for the students?
We did look at a schedule that started with the technical school students having period 1 at the high school and then going to the tech school, which would have them starting around 7:10. The problem with that was twofold. One, our information is that next year, or possibly the following year, because they haven't voted yet, but the little birdies out there are saying that Penridge is going to be changing their school start time. And we were concerned about or I'll say I am concerned. I'll put my name on it. It's okay. I am concerned about having changed the schedule for the community this year, changing it next year, and having to change it back. I don't think that, I have not heard that that's what our community is looking for. I think that they were looking for a little more stability with the school start times, and just hearing that, this year your kid's going to start school at 8, and next year they're going to start at 7, and then the next year they might start at 8. Felt like this was a solution to that, to ensure that we could meet the needs of our kids, and then also the students while they're at the technical school, being there at the same time as the other sending schools. So Palisades is actually shifting their time so that the students will arrive at the technical school right around that 8:20 time. Penridge said between 8:20 and 8:25. So with this schedule, we're all aligned to get to the tech school at the same time and leave the tech school at the same time, with nobody having to fit their social studies into a pride, and nobody having 10 minutes in the lunch line to not be able to eat, and nobody sitting in the cafeteria or the auditorium for 15 minutes losing instructional time. So I'm not saying there's no other option. We can certainly go back and look, but those were the concerns that I heard when working with Mr. V and Dr. Zakin on this plan, and this one meets.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother. I mean, I think the flip idea was just to try to get rid of a pain. It was just
Right.
a short term, hey, maybe if we just flipped it today, life would be better. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that.
So I appreciate that, John. And that's why I was just, I think where I was getting at, I believe, and you just validated, that the district administration did look at that scenario, but this is the better option. So that's all I was hoping. It looked into, but based on your discussions, it makes sense that this is the better option that was presented. So where we take this right now, relevant to start time, because it was just floated in front of the board.
Right.
Do we have to wait until the sending districts, or other schools, or would there be any change to this? At what time would we need to vote on this as a board for discussion?
So my understanding is that the board doesn't need to, we learned that the board doesn't need to vote on start times, but in an effort to sort of make sure that we are being fully transparent early on, it was my hope that I could share this now back in October and November, so that if people had questions or concerns, we could talk about it before we put it into play. I think that the financial implication of asking for the 2 additional buses, or verifying with Brooke that it is 2 additional buses, to make sure that we understand that time. Last I looked at it, I think that we might need to make the start time for Strayer somewhere around 8:10 or 8:15, just because you do need just a short buffer to get to the different schools. And Mrs. Pallone is here, but again, with me putting people on the spot that didn't know they were going to be asked, she can at least get that information for us on Thursday, maybe, so that you have a little bit more information about what the exact start time would be at 6 through 8 if this was to move forward. And then any other questions that you would have at that point. I think as long as we have a general direction and we're moving towards it and we can start working on that, we don't need a formal approval right now, but I think it would be helpful for the community to have a plan and know what our plans were moving forward.
Good.
Earlier is better.
I had a question, though. Has Levy been asked about, how they feel that they could staff this if we do have to add more buses?
I know that Brooke was in conversation with Levy and working on some potential routes. I'd have to ask her specifically what was said. I wasn't in those meetings.
Because one of the emails from Dr. Harner mentioned something about picking some students, the possibility of picking students up direct and taking them directly to the tech school. I don't know how that works efficiency-wise or anything else, but it would seem to be more buses that way.
We did determine that was one of the options that he had asked us to look into, and we determined that was probably not fiscally responsible in terms of the amount of buses we would need to be able to do that, when they could still get there on time, coming in on the regular bus system, almost operating as a hub and going out to tech. So we sort of moved into that direction once we realized that was going to be the minimal impact approach, I guess.
Good.
And then the last question or request I have
Last one.
I gave my high school bell schedule, that sheet to Diane at the last meeting.
Okay.
Is it possible that I could get one of those emailed to me?
Absolutely.
Or
Oh, you want
a paper
hard copy or
Either
email?
way, either way.
Sure. The other paper that was with it, just so you know, and I'll pass over to you, was called Proposal to Panther Day. So with this schedule, we don't have a formal Pride period in the day, every day anymore, in order to meet the needs of all of our students. So we will need, thank you, we will need to utilize a specialized schedule from time to time, and we have not determined at this point whether that would be certain days of the week, certain times of the month, or what that would look like, but we just did want to share when we had to have those days, what that schedule would look like. So that's the other one.
And to clarify, for those that aren't familiar with Panther Day, is Panther Day more hours associated with the funding we're receiving for COVID, or is it just?
No, so just right now, we call it a Pride period, and it's a period in the day where students can get extra help. Sometimes clubs meet. They can work on their homework, different things depending on any given day. In our new schedule, we have more instructional time, so students are in each class for more minutes, but they don't have that kind of flexible period during the day for Pride. So what we wanted to do was create a schedule, and this is actually similar to when Dr. Zakin and I were in the high school, which now has been quite some years, but thinking about back to those years, maybe around 2012 or so, we had a similar schedule to this where we used to run it 4 days a month, I think, if I can remember correctly. And students would then be able to either participate in any kind of lesson that needed to happen, if there was some kind of all-student assembly or other information. When they were seniors, these would be the times where they would have meetings about graduation and upcoming, information on testing. And then also on the alternate days, it would just be that extra time to get support from your teachers. So we've floated a couple ideas. Maybe this is something we run once a week. Maybe it's something we run twice a week. Maybe it's something we run a couple times a month. And those decisions haven't been made at this point, certainly because we haven't decided that that's the schedule that we're going to have. But
Good. Okay.
and I just wanted to go back real quick about the start time decision. The only, not the only, but a large benefit of making a decision earlier is so that we could order the buses if we need more buses. So obviously there's a lead time to that. So if we're going to tell Levy that we, are interested in doing a 2-tier and we need those 2 additional buses, then the sooner we can let them know, the easier it will be for them to acquire those buses.
Okay.
One other thing about knowing ahead of time is we can put things out to the public, whether Gary writes an article and sort of previews the options that we're looking at so that people have plenty of time to not be surprised.
Good.
Well, one other option too for ordering new buses is, I do recall when we looked into that contract, when we renewed Levy, that there was a sundowning, or I guess a retirement time for buses, like when they hit a certain amount of mileage or a certain number of years. I have heard from watching other school board meetings that they've extended that out a little bit, so maybe we had 2 buses that were due to retire in the next year that we could, just fold those over back in. I don't know how, I don't know how that would work contractually. I don't know how any of that would work, but, that is an option we could consider too. And I'd like to know safety-wise too, if it would be something that we could consider.
Certainly, I would defer to Mrs. Plone, but I do believe we did that option this year.
Oh, we did. Okay.
Good.
Doesn't look like she wants to come up and talk, but
Sorry, I couldn't see you. I couldn't see.
Should be on. You try that one. Yeah.
So we did utilize that this year because they had even actually ordered buses, and 2 of them, I think, we're still waiting for them to come in. One of them did come in. So that was their ask was, can we know as soon as possible, because we don't want to put a 2-tier system in place that we can't run. And then the other thing is it does have to do with the miles, I think, and it's 10 years, but it really also goes back to the subsidy that we receive for the buses. So each year we have that bus, the subsidy that we receive from the state goes down.
Good.
Yeah,
And
but I'm just saying, if we got into a position where we needed to, we couldn't get buses in time, that should be able to be an option, that we could defer retiring those buses until we could get new equipment in.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So, Mrs. Pullen, relevant to the buses, I know a lot of industries, car industries, like you would order a car, you have to wait months. What's the bus lead time right now? Is it 6 to 9 months?
I can let you know. It
Okay.
changes all the time. I know Warren has been told he was going to get, we had ordered a wheelchair lift bus, and he was promised he was going to have it by, I think it was the end of last school year, and it just kept getting pushed back, and I think they just got it last month.
Okay. Yep, understood. All right, sooner the better. Yep, good, thank you. So if we were to give direction, Dr. Hoffman, to the administration on this schedule in November, that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And certainly, as Mr. Kern said, and was my desire to have this in front of the community so that there were no surprises and it wasn't, wasn't something that later could be said that the administration didn't give enough time for.
Okay, good. And then I know we talked briefly, I have it on the calendar, was the school calendar. I know Ms. Edwards has come up a few times to the board meetings and asked us for our input, and we sort of, I think, rolled out right now the half days as an option for the calendar. She had mentioned the calendar would be similar to this year for next year, based on the input so far from the board. When does this calendar finalize, would you say? Or is there an ability to add additional input at any given time before finalization?
I would have to defer to Ms. Edwards
Okay.
for that. And
I think it's normally January or something like that.
I don't know when she plans to meet with the other districts or if she's done that yet, but that's usually the next step. I think she was seeking input from the board before she did that so that she could make sure our calendars aligned. Best of my recollection, maybe she does that meeting sometime in December, but again, I'd have to defer to her for the exact timeline. I would certainly think that if there was more input that the board wanted to give, I would speak on behalf of her without having talked to her. I would assume she would want that sooner than later,
Yeah.
so that she could move forward with that calendar. But again,
Okay.
I would defer to her for whatever she needs
right.
in terms of getting that calendar set up.
Good. All right. Yeah, it's just always nice to have knowledge of when the key deadlines are, and the more input that we can give up front, the better we're going to be in the end. Yep, okay. And then I know I had that rolling list. Is there any structural changes you feel, I know I have a rolling list, but the reason for these meetings was structural changes, Levy bus is a structural change, two-tier busing is a structural change. Program studies is a structural change. Any structural changes that you feel you need for the 23-24 school year board input this year, besides what was already discussed, that you've?
Well, let me back up for a second. I just wanted to let you know we did put together, and special thanks to Dr. Alexa Carter and Eileen Finlayson for putting together that document on the 10 years of SAT, ACT, PSSA, and Keystone data for you, which is linked in here.
Okay.
I do think that we found maybe one small error, but not errors with numbers. Oh, you fixed it already, and she already uploaded it. I mean, do I have the best team or what?
Nice.
And so that's in there for you to look at. Again, you'll see some years where there's missing data or where the test has changed, but overall the data is in there for you. And I did create a document that has middle and high school class sizes currently. Having a little bit of trouble figuring out how I could do that for the past 10 years. So if that's a direction, I'm going to need some time on that. But those are the last of the topics that I believed were presented for us to have a kind of a product back to you.
Yep.
Some of the other topics that you had on your list here in terms of combining 6, 7, 8, and it says relocating QE students to the 6th grade center during potential renovation or while repurposing the building. Those, I wasn't sure if you were looking for information from me on those or...
Yeah, it was more, I think, in tune, once we look at the class size data, it's really looking at the quality of education. What's the quality of education look like if you were to move forward with that plan? I know that the facilities is looking at it from a capacity standpoint, but looking at I toured those buildings, and to me, there looks like, the 6th grade campus can absorb the QE students because the building's so large that it would be a no-brainer that they would have a, educational environment equivalent or better to what they have today. So I was just, if there's something I didn't see, that's the reason I was asking it.
Okay,
If
so
you feel like if you move QE to sixth grade, there's an educational disadvantage, that would be something of interest, but I couldn't see anything from my observations.
Okay, so just so I make sure I have this correct, the ask of me is for updated class sizes so that you can see where we're sitting in terms of class sizes in each of the buildings, and then additionally to provide some information about elementary students being placed in the sixth grade center and potential disadvantages to that?
Or advantages, pros and cons, or just,
Okay.
The quality of education.
Well, how that would work around the IU classrooms and, you know what I mean? If there's space, are you saying add them along with the sixth graders?
Well,
or-
no, this is really really that there was, talks and discussions in the past about combining the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders at Strayer. Basically, if you do that, then that opens up the sixth grade center to more students. We all know that QE is an old building, so it either has to be renovated or repurposed, whatever it happens there. But during that, the QE students have to relocate, and it'd be better for them to be in a building, a school building, instead of being in modules outside. So I think that it's an easy walk for QE students that they go walk to QE. A lot of walkers there. I was at that building. And then they could walk, as easy to the sixth grade campus. So I'm just looking at it from a quality of education, and I think there's no true disadvantages, but if there is disadvantages, I'm just not aware of them. That's all.
Okay, I can prepare that information for you. I think that the majority of the questions that you kind of have in terms of facilities would best be answered by the facilities committee, but in terms of the education of students, I can certainly prepare something for you about that.
I mean, I was looking at class sizes for QE, for instance. I think when I was looking at QE itself, there was like a grade where you couldn't expand further. There was just building limitations. You can't go any further. So if you go to a bigger school, you have more room, you could expand that grade, I assume. I'm just thinking out loud.
Okay, I would have to go and look. I think that part of my understanding was that the board looking at that facilities study or updated, I don't remember if it got voted on or not. Not yet. No, I'm looking at Dawn for anything.
No, I
in
believe,
terms of getting
that they've started on that, correct?
Okay,
Yeah, like a dashboard of the
No,
the data.
I mean, I thought Dewey and Schrader were actually preparing.
okay.
Yeah,
Ms.
they're
Young?
preparing it, another full study. That's why I was saying when Rob was preparing the dashboard, I was going to say it may have been a little redundant because once we get the Schrader and Dewey information in, that's going to fill in a lot of those unknowns that we have. So that's in progress, right?
Yeah,
We approved it and paid
It was
for it.
approved and it's in progress.
Yeah.
So perhaps with that information in terms of maybe we wait for, I don't know, I'm just guessing, maybe we wait for some of that information to come back to determine possibilities, and in the meantime, I can come up with some generalized educational best practices in terms of space and numbers.
Yeah,
Not sure what's out there, but I can work
Understood.
on something.
No,
I guess I would say, I think of it as, if we're modeling opportunities, when I use the term model for simulating or however you want to put it, but the opportunity for moving the QE students into classrooms in the sixth grade center, either with or without the current, I don't know if it fits with the current with the current sixth grades there, but then the other element is if we put the sixth graders back together with the middle school, like where they came from, what sort of economies of scale, would we realize with that regarding teachers? Because I know some of the problems we have with certain building configurations and teachers is you're stuck with when we're at the ragged edge of class size. When there's like 30. So the way I'm thinking of this is if I had some magical model that we'd be able to wield, we could move things around and see. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of is.
Understood. And I think we have some of that data in terms of, the benefits for specialized programming, special education courses, and those types of things. And I believe, hopefully I'm not misspeaking, but I believe that after this came up last time, Dr. Harner asked Dr. Bubser to kind of just play around with what that would look like in her building. So I can follow up and make sure that request is made if that's what you're asking for.
Yeah.
And see where we are and hopefully bring something back to you on Thursday for a first look.
Sure. Yeah, I think, something like moving students around is a structural change. That's the reason I had it early on for these types of sessions for discussion. But I appreciate you asking for clarification there on what we're looking for. But yes, it looks like everything else is good. So yeah, in addition to, I'll look at the data relevant to what you uploaded, and then if there's more, I'm not sure if there's any other items of interest to discuss.
Well, I just want to, if it's okay, if we can just talk about for Thursday's meeting, I will have an enrollment update for you in terms of the live birth rates and our projected enrollment for next year. So I'll be able to present that to you on Thursday night.
Was there a COVID baby boom? Can you give us a sneak preview? I've
How about
heard.
some
I don't think we're
suspense?
getting any 3-year-olds in school.
Suspense. The suspense will be building. There was an anomaly of an area where there were a lot of births that we were not expecting, but just in one municipality, so not overall. But that'll be the cliffhanger until you wait for my enrollment report on Thursday night. I don't want to give it away all right now. I will have the updated class size document for you, which is 6 through 12 at this point, because you do have the monthly elementary that's already a little bit more focused. So that'll be presented to you. We will have on the board agenda for Thursday night data presentation on beginning of the year benchmark data that is read only. Would you like for us to discuss that at the education committee meeting prior to that, or?
Yeah, that'd be good too. I mean, if we have time, keep in mind we only have a half hour.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'll put that I'll put that on there. And we have it already on the board agenda for you, as I said, as read only. But if there's any questions, we can talk about that then. Was there anything else that you'd like me to have prepared for the meeting on Thursday?
Oh, the big one is program studies, right?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
So I'm wondering if we should would it be helpful if we created, I think it's page 3 or page 5 of the document that has the graduation requirements. Would you like us to have 2 versions of that page? One with like version A as is and version B with half credits so that
For the
you can-
tech, yeah, make it easier. This way we can approve A or B.
approve- okay.
Yeah. And then, the board collectively.
I'll say that's not a problem. They're already writing it down. Once again, I mean, really, can we have a celebration for my OTL team here? They are
Well
amazing.
time. I like it.
Well, there's a round of applause for people watching at home that can
Golf
hear
clap.
how great they are. I really am blessed, though. They are right on it. So thank you.
So regarding the 10 years of data, the couple little bits of thoughts that I have just off the cuff.
Sure.
The SAT scores, for example, are, even though the cynic in me says we keep changing the rulers that we use, I mean the measurement, units of measure, just so that it's impossible to have any kind of longitudinal, like, God
It
forbid we
does
can
appear that
actually
way.
see how education has happened in the past 50 years, because it might shock us all. But I'll just tuck that aside, even though I said it out loud. If you did something more like the percent of max, you could even potentially see a slightly different view then, because it's like, hey, we measured it in apples, the first half of that chart, and now we're measuring it in oranges. But if you said, well, how did we do the percent of the maximum possible, you could maybe get another view. Actually, anyway, and that's one thought.
Okay.
And the other funny thing is, boy, the ACT scores just looks dopey. I think I
Wonderful.
took both of these when I was a kid, but really, like 23 versus 24, okay, like that's a strange, obviously not very granular score. I don't know. But then looking at the PSSA ELA results and the math results, without being able to play with it myself.
Would you like me to give you a copy of the Excel sheet?
You could. I was just
I could
wondering,
do
like,
that.
if I
It
were to look
seems
at,
like if
if I
we
was to
could-
look at this with the line charts,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to see trends when you a bunch of bar graphs.
Agreed.
Right? I mean, I can see a trend that, okay, 2021, 22 looks like we fell off a cliff. I can see that. But I don't know. And is it too many lines to see what it look? Anyway, my brain works on trends, and this starts to get me, but I don't know that the bar chart's the best way to show trends.
I don't disagree, but at around 10, what time do we think it was? 10:45 or 11 o'clock when the meeting started at 12, that's the best that we could get together because we were just still getting the data together. So I'm happy to
Okay, that's
provide
cool.
you with that and then also look at some different ways to represent the data.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, just so that you know, if you are looking at the SAT, ACT data, we don't have any ACT data past 2019, and 2021 and 2022 for SAT, we saw a sharp decline of students taking because many schools were test optional during this time. So you'll see that we went from having well over 200 students test to 29. So it's important when you're looking at the scores and the averages to also think about the number of students who are testing.
That would be a really good graph to show the number of, the
I just
percentage.
got myself another graph by mentioning that, didn't
Yeah.
I?
Yeah,
Well, no, that is
I
good
was
because
just
I was stunned. If you would have asked me how many seniors took this, I would have said, oh, like everybody in my family took it. Like, doesn't everybody take this? I'm like, what? Like these numbers are, I don't know. I guess why subject yourself to a hard test? But that would be really valuable too, because what does it mean?
And I would request, too, that you have a state average line to compare, see how we're trending along with the state average.
For anything in particular or for everything?
I think the PSSA and the SAT probably gives you state numbers.
That's what I thought. So
If
what
it's not,
happens
then,
is,
yeah.
what we have found is that even through, so we have to remember that the state reporting of these documents has been done now in 3 different ways. Right now, we're under the Future Ready Index. Previously, we were under the School Performance Profile, and I don't know if anybody in the audience remembers what it was called before that, before the SPP. That was the School Performance Profile. But something before that. So anyway, we've had 3 different, during this span of testing, we've had 3 different ways of reporting those scores. You can't go back into the old files because they're not published anymore, where they used to write what the averages were. We're even having trouble, as you'll see in the data for PSSA, getting back before 2015 because the test changed, and even our e-metric, which is where we gather all of our data, doesn't go back before that. So I will commit to getting you the average for anything I can find. How about that?
Don't
I
don't
was
kill
gonna say,
yourself.
don't
trying
beat
to get-
yourself up over it.
Right,
I
yeah.
just.
I mean, it's actually, I don't know. It says more about the I won't call it the military industrial complex, but it sounds a lot like that. It's this strange world that you have to live in.
I believe we may be able to find some of that data, particularly for recent years, that we can still get to quickly. But when I say recent years, we have to remember that when they did the Future Ready Index last year, they actually were 2 years in arrears for that, so we were 3 years behind. So I'll do my best.
It may only
In
go
short,
to
I'll do my best.
2019.
We'll do our best.
Good. Yep, so I think we have a pretty good agenda for a half-hour session on Thursday. Yep. And that's all I have. Any other comments, discussions? Good. All right, it's the end of the education